Hello everyone, welcome to a Second Thoughts overview of Morathi of the Dark Elves. I played through the initial turns and have some conclusions on how the faction plays out. As always, in the end I'll give you the typical armies I would try out to maximize variety and to try different compositions, just for a bit of fun. Now, without further ado, let's play with Morathi. For our short victory condition, we need to destroy the faction of Harganeth, or to occupy, loot, raise, and sack 30 different settlements. So, Harganeth is located pretty far away from your starting location, but not impossible to reach it. It just states that mainly you should go to the north, or proceed at least to the north, and then maybe you can cross here, you know, just to finish that off. Maybe you already have 30 different settlements by then. Yeah, that seems to be the idea. However, well, before we speak of it long, the reward is very decent. You know, it will allow you better recruits and better units overall during the course of the game. +3 recruit rank, it's always nice. Now, as I was going to say, long victory conditions change. So the short forces you to go to the north, and then the long campaign means you need to achieve the short victory, then occupy, loot, raise, or sack 75. Nothing too different here. You also need to control the Shrine of Cain, located here, which also has the mechanic there. And you need to destroy basically every single major High Elf faction. The biggest issue with this is that although some of them are in your vicinity, the Order of Lord Masters certainly is not. It's down there, and if they survive, it's a big problem. They may create a big empire before you reach them. And the Knights of Caledor are the same, and they're located here in the middle. So, I don't know. Without these two, it would be much easier, because it's just the major factions in Ulthuan, which you probably most likely will want to have in any ways. And you also still need to maintain 18. I don't know. This long campaign may prove way too long. You may be able to achieve domination before that. Still, completing, you'll get plus 15% income from slaves. More on that on the mechanic later, but it's a good buff, although for the very late game at this point. Unless you have the luck of Order of Lord Masters and Knights of Caledor being eliminated early, you may not be able to use or to have even this bonus for a long time. Now, Morathi, she's the Hag Sorceress of Grond. She spreads Slaanesh corruption. She also gains recruitment of Slaanesh Demonettes. Her hero action cost is minus 50%, so make sure that you abuse that to you know, some hero actions now become much more viable, of course, under her. Construction costs minus 25% for sorcery buildings. That helps. It's all focused on the magic part and under sorcery, and actually on getting sorceresses as well. And all characters, of course, spread Slaanesh corruption. Now, pretty decent sort of bonuses, and they lure you into a different set of playthrough, which is excellent. It's always what I want, you know, more variety of playthrough. So, in terms of climates, there's the big problem, because for the most part, she doesn't really enjoy a lot. So, mainly to the north, it's the most less troublesome areas, and even then there's some mountains and some red terrain there. And then you have Ulthuan, and then nothing really else. Everything else is kind of yellow or red, so it's going to be quite a problem doing a domination campaign with Morathi. And remember that the long campaign is already really long, so it may be a difficult, unless you want to play just for the short campaign, it may be difficult to complete this one. Your starting location is very good. Tucked in capital, great special building as well, 4 settlement province. What else can you expect? You know, it's really a really nice place to start. Nearby enemies will be High Elves, some of these Dark Elves. You will have in between some Wood Elves to the north, some Skaven, some Tomb Kings even. Lizardmen may be a problem to the south, but they do start with an non-aggression pact. I recommend that you try to maintain it. And then you can have some Vampire Coast near here, so yeah. But typically, High Elves, other Dark Elves will be your main enemies for quite some time. Typical expansion is either take Ulthuan first, or go to the north first. Up to you. Trying to sustain war into both locations may be difficult, but It's up to you again. Going to the south into the Lizardmen may prove to be more of a problem than a good idea. So, yeah, I would refrain from that, but it's not like I can tell you what to do, right? You can do whatever. But yeah, it may just add further enemies that are not really necessary, considering your faction's objectives. So yeah, mainly to the north or to Ulthuan. So diplomatically, you're part of the Evil Tide. In addition, your unique Slaanesh devotion brings you closer with Nakari, so it is important to note that you have a non-aggression pact with them and with Hexotl, and it may prove worthy to try to ensure they do not have issues from that side, from this area here. Contrary to what happens when you're a Hexotl, they do not typically start a war, of course, but be wary, different circumstances in different campaigns may happen. So, as for outposts, most likely solutions will be then Slaanesh for some single entities from some good infantry, maybe some cavalry. You can also get some lizardmen for their dinosaurs, of course, particularly healing. That would be great for the Dark Elves, actually. It's one of their flaws, actually. And if you can manage some Vampire Coast, of course, friends, and maybe with Salostra if she survives or somewhere else, of course you can always benefit from that range. So, Slaanesh Corruption, it gives some extra positive effects, especially with the Slaves mechanic. Do note, the enables attrition for non-chaos worshipping armies, that's great. It also helps out to ensure that your places are more difficult, basically to conquer by someone else, or to invade by someone else. Now, speaking a little bit of slaves, they changed this from Warhammer 2. It now globally generates income with some nice buffs if you obtain vast numbers of slaves. I haven't obtained it here, but basically the more slaves that you have, the better. In essence, as you can see there, it will give construction bonuses, but can negatively affect control node. Now, slaves are also used for dictats, which you can issue in provinces. These, for instance, there are 3 of them. One costs for 100 slaves and gives you 20 control for 5 turns. Excellent to ensure that that the forces don't rebel. You also have this one that costs 600, generates 1000 treasury and just a little bit of control. I don't know how useful this one is, but maybe if you're in a hurry for money or something like that. And then you also have the slave drive. So it costs 400 slaves and gives you growth plus 50 for 5 turns. This is excellent, actually. It is a decent bonus, of course, if you can spare the slaves. But yeah, some good abilities, dictats, so that you can benefit from those slaves or any excess slaves that you may have. Excess slaves. Now, in terms of the slaves, you can also use them for rites. The first rite is the Black Ark. Now, basically, these are mobile horde army styles. They can only move on the sea, but still very beneficial because they can assist with a certain range nearby armies with bombardment army abilities that are really great, as well as replenishment. And you can also build up armies from there. They act like the global recruitment, which you don't have, so you kind of need these to have a global sort of recruitment. But yeah, it's mostly, often than not, it's better actually to build up the buildings in the Black Ark than in your provinces. So you can also have the sacrifice to Hecate, which is basically a rite for more focused on the sorceresses and supreme sorceresses and some hero action success chance sorceresses, more winds of magic, so basically all around that. You can also have the sacrifice to Cain for more casualties captured, meaning more slaves, remember that. Income from post-battle loot, it enhances greatly, and casualty replenishment rate plus 20%, and then this army ability is an explosion, it's great, does not affect friendly troops, which is excellent. So yeah. Then you also have the sacrifice to authority. Basically, on turn start, lords have a chance to gain 2 loyalty. Of course, you still have that loyalty mechanic to bear in mind, and the control plus 8 to all provinces. Speaking of that loyalty mechanic, basically every single lord has a loyalty mechanic. If it reaches 0, they'll rebel. They'll take their army to form a new faction. Please be wary of this. You'll always have some warning in advance that the loyalty is low for someone, so that you can maybe replace that lord, or send him on a suicide mission, or do the other way around. Just ensure that he gets loyalty back. So which is more often than not the right course of action. Please don't kill your lords, especially the valuable ones. So, one of the best mechanics actually is this one, is the name of power. So, reaching level 10, you can choose a name of power with drastic implications to your lord and army composition. I'll have a list of those later on. And I'd like you to pause then when I show them, because they're really cool, and it changes drastically how the faction plays out as well. An awesome mechanic, one of the best in my opinion, actually. In terms of province edicts, we have a control edict. We then have an income from post-battle loot, recruit rank and weapon strength for armies in province, but reduced slaves minus 50 per turn. That's considerable. You also have another one with minus 50 slaves, which gives you growth and income from slaves. These two are kind of interesting to use. Be wary of that, because of course if you maintain them for longer periods of time, it will cripple your economy for sure. Your economy always drives on slaves, so be sure that you can maintain this. You also have a sort of defensive one. Enemy hero action success minus in your province. Ambush success chance of intercepting an army. So if you need to defend this province or a province for sure, you may be willing to use this one. Or you can have just a generalized income from all buildings. Always a nice one. It's an interesting take in terms of the overall edicts. Now the reduction for slaves is really quite significant in the early and mid game. You make a mental note to always check the edicts to ensure you don't run out of slaves all the time. Now for army stances, basically it likes the encampment, which is important. You have the channeling, which doesn't give you reduced attrition but enables replenishment, and then you have the raiding, which gives you slaves based on the strength of the army and immune to most attrition. So this is the one that you use for attrition. But note that since you don't have the encamp, you can't be immune to attrition and replenishing at the same time, basically. So be wary of that. And you also have the ambush for 25%. A note I didn't say: 25% movement range penalty for the raiding. So you can, it's better than the other ones, which is 50%. So yeah, and ambush with 25% here. So a good selection, but because of the climate, they do suffer from not having an encamp. So it will be slower, your conquest already, because of the climate. It will be even slower because you can't encamp. Bear that in mind, okay? Really bear that in mind. Now, there's 3 special buildings, including the Court of the Dark Prince here. So there's 8 military buildings, so many, including this one. But 3 can be built actually in minor settlements, and you should take all the advantage that they can give you. So Tier 3 units are already excellent. You have Sisters of Slaughter, Black Ark Corsairs, you have your artillery piece, you have some sort of cavalry with the Doomfire Warlocks, you have Shades, which are great units. You also have some Scourge Runner Chariots, some Bloodrock Medusas, and even the Witch Elves and the Demonettes of Slanesh. So Tier 3 is already a good army, so that can help you out, especially in the early game. Having Demonettes really helps in making this a different faction to play, contrary to the Dark Elves, because you have fast-moving infantry, so you can have some fast armies that deal tons of damage early on. Now, in terms of infrastructure, so this counts as infrastructure, and you have a control, a hero recruitment building basically as well, some corruption spreading building as well, which is it's decent. Then we have a growth, casualty replenishment rate, and faction slave capacity, more income from slaves. You also have an income building, but do note when the slaves are really high, it reduces them by 60 per turn, so be wary of that. Okay, be wary of these buildings. And you also have a slave market, which gives you slaves per turn, minus some control. It's the only building that actually gives you slaves per turn, if not mistaken. So yeah, be mindful of that. And finally, you have a campaign movement range plus 15% for foreign armies. There's some growth, some income from trade tariffs. Less slave costs for dictates. It's decent. It's like 40 to 60 less slave costs. So that can help. and income from all buildings to local province. So that's your choices. Overall good options, plenty of different choices to go in terms of armies as well, which is excellent. Now research does change a little bit because of course you have the demonettes, so if not and the Slaanesh corruption, so I'm not mistaken, yes, you have there. But in general it's the same from the Dark Elves, and it benefits greatly for your campaign abilities and for your units. So there's bonuses for nearly every single unit, which is great. And even reaching in the end, if you have researched everything, your units will be really powerful. Trust me, they will really be powerful, and you'll notice that in battle as well. So one note here on the heroes. So it is important that you note that the Death Hag is the one that replenishes troops. Okay. Then you have also the Master, which is on tier 2. This is interesting because you may have a hero really fast. And you also have the Knight Assassin, which is pretty decent. It increases slave income, which is quite worth it. You also have the Sorceresses of Death, of course, spreading control, some scouting. But for the most part, I would always have a Death Hag because of the replenished troops ability, of course. So, the typical site for skills, you do have your typical Lord skills, then some melee and magical skills. Of course, Morathi does have both, which is excellent. You have a red line or army skills, and then you have the blue line or campaign skills. Starting with the blue line. The dreaded slavery, it's decent for getting more slaves. Of course, you've seen how effective those are, but the other ones are really not that important. Maybe this for some more income. Then we have the quartermaster for less upkeep, and we also have the replenishment rate here and minus attrition casualties. This is invaluable because you're gonna have to fight in very rough terrain, basically climates. So I would definitely have to go through this. Of course, with Morathi, maybe tricky to get everything that she can, but yeah, it may be your choice. More on her later on, but note that Insidious and Tenacious are mutually exclusive. You have to choose which one you prefer, and they all have different abilities. Some for campaign maps, some from other, some from the campaign, some from the army, so be wary of that. For instance, this one provides immediately casualty replenishment rate and some ward save. It's excellent. This one provides lots of upkeep reduction, so yeah, be wary of those to choose wisely. Now, in terms of the red line, so although you do have demonettes, they are not buffed by anything here, so they didn't change the skills for Morathi, so it's still the Dark Elves, but they are really good units nevertheless, so you'll be able to use them. Now, it is rather average to expensive, mostly because you have elite units separated from the other units. So for instance, even the chariots and knight units, like the cavalry units, are still separated. So yeah, it may be a main issue when you want to evolve your armies. A note for the Beastmaster Lords, I don't have one here, but they have specific buffs for most monsters. More on that later. Now, the schools of magic are all quite decent. Morathi has a mix of shadows and dark, but yeah, they will prove quite invaluable for you. Let me show you the heroes here, not the heroes, the lords here with the supreme sorceress. So yeah, between beasts, death, fire, shadows, dark, lots of damage and debuffs, so really cool. You can combine a few, especially Morathi, to have some nice abilities. And finally, the names of power. Let me show you the mechanic. So here's the list, basically, divided into aristocratic, into revered, and martial over there. So they can drastically change your play style. So typical choices to try are, for instance, Barb Storm for more ammunition, Missile Strength for all missile units. Of course, missile units are really powerful with this army. You can also have some good for Black Guards of Nagaron, some more causes fear, armor plus 10, recruit experience. This is decent. Black Hair Corsairs are really good, but more for Loki. But of course, you can use Kraken Claw. Shadow Dart is great for the Shades. Plus 35 range, cause fear, and recruit rank plus 2. This basically means you can have a full Doom stack of shades if you would like, and they'll do it really great, really great. So the idea here is that you have different choices in terms of names of power, and they will drastically change how you fight with those armies. So yeah, take a look around on those names, and or not, just choose one whatever and just play with it, and that's the idea as well. So yeah, but this is one of the best mechanics in the game for me, especially for the Dark Elves. I really like that, how varied the game, the playthrough becomes with these skills, with just one skill. So here are the red line skills for the Dark Elves. Notice how they have split infantry, basically, you know, and split chariots and knights, of course, and cavalry. So this leads to difficult ways of spending skill points without over-investing them. So then it's not like you can upgrade from, you know, basic cavalry to elite cavalry without having to spend some skill points there. Of course, you may not even choose to build up any red line skills. It's up to you, but it's something that I like to do to have some variety in my armies. So basically, Morathi, she has some bonuses for Shades, Dark Riders, then Doomfire Warlocks and Scorch Runner Chariot units. So of course I built up just a small army with some Shades, some Scorch Runners, some Warlocks there. Maybe that would be an idea, but do note that you have to choose between these two. So be wary of that. You can of course just give them ward save, like you see there. It's not too much, but 5%, you know, can tip the balance into your favor in some engagements. So yeah, of course, you also have an army with some demonettes for some flavor. Of course, you can have a traditional army from the Dark Elves, of course, with some good heavy infantry, shades, some monsters. It's always good. Notice how they are average in terms of expensive red line skills. The problem is that you have a lot of skill points that you need to use for your caster melee hero, melee lord, basically. So yeah, this may prove expensive. 15 may already prove expensive. 12, 11, those are better ideas. The idea behind this army, for instance, is just a small mobility idea. Maybe for an ambush-based army. Maybe I want to go into an ambush-based playthrough. So almost all of these units are really good at that because they're fast. You know, the War Hydra is like 40 or 45 speed, and they are the slowest in this army. These are the shrines, so they will have some bonuses for whoever's fighting with them. So join them with the demonettes and you get tons of killing power. So yeah, this is just for fun, guys. As always, that's the idea. This is what I would try. Just have some different variety, you know. In terms of basic armies, you can use a lot of combinations, including some tier 3 armies, such as in the example here, that will do still well into the late game a little bit, especially as a sweeper army, like I like to give you sometimes, you know, a cost-effective army like reduced upkeep that can still fight decently, you know, or to just sweep around while the big armies go and proceed, you know. As always, some infantry-based, some missile-based, and then some cavalry or some monsters. I typically exclude cavalry and monsters together just because of how the red line works, but by all means you can use that if you wish. Okay. Now, finally, like I mentioned in the Malketh video, so Beastmasters can have some nice compositions around the monsters and the cold ones, which makes them the different. So they are the ones that actually mix up cavalry and monsters and do really fine with that. Notice how expensive they are in terms of red line skills, but still this one is not with 10, and although it lacks some range, you can have some with the Bloodwrack Medusas and with Khainite assassins and such, and you also have some flyers, so you have some mobility that can reach out to enemy artillery, for instance, and deal with them. Have some anti-large, great single entities, a defender type of unit. So yeah, you may have quite some fun with these armies. But as always, it's up to you. The army compositions that I show here are what I would like to have some fun with, and but feel free to disregard and modify them, or please show them the ones that you have. Share the ones that you are thinking about. So, the faction is still heavily focused on the slave mechanic, encouraging you to keep fighting and raiding and raising. It has a nice twist with this Slanesh corruption here. So, that also implies that you can have some relations with Nakari, good relations with him, so that if that faction remains alive and can assist you, by all means, it may be itself be an interesting campaign. I would honestly, if Nakari is in danger of getting wiped out, just gift him a settlement nearby that you have to make it survive, and then later on it will definitely be a worthy ally. Now, it is difficult to conquer the whole map, as you've known, because of the climate sustainability, but you definitely have some mobility with the Black Arcs. For the most part, coastal areas are good, at least for you to unleash your full power, and that's where your faction really shines indeed. As for Morathi, the location alone is nice to have a different experience than Malekith, and certainly with the whole Slaanesh vibe than any other Dark Elf faction. Embrace that, really. Now, your army consists of great infantry, great missiles, great cavalry, although expensive, great single entities, good flyers, armor-piercing emphasis for sure, it lacks health, and does lack some range. Now, replenishment is good, but considering the climate, it may still prove difficult to have a domination campaign. It is now time, then, to follow Morathi of the Dark Elves.